Hey guys, it's Stormboy13 here. It's been several weeks since I've done a weather topic video. Just had stuff going on, but today, well, this was filmed the 3rd of October, Wednesday. Um, no one told me to do this, but because of the potential threats of hurricane, well, if it forms into a hurricane or tropical storm, we may have a name of Michael, which could potentially impact the Florida Keys and Miami. However, though, this is a few days to a week away, and it may be completely different. But I thought I decided, because I haven't done much videos recently, just do a bit of history of the 1926 Miami hurricane. So, when you're ready, let's I'll explain about it. So, here we go. This is the general information from the 1926 Miami hurricane. Now, as we know, back in the 1920s, hurricane names haven't been invented yet. Well, not invented. What's the other word I'm looking for? They never got around to it, that's what we say. But anyway, so the 1926 Miami hurricane, was definitely commonly known the Great Miami Hurricane. We know it was a large and extremely intense tropical cyclone, which devastated the greater Miami area and caused extensive damage, not just across southeast Florida and Miami, but also in the Bahamas and the US Gulf Coast, which happened on the month of September of 1926, occurring $100 million in damage. That would be the second costliest in US history when adjusted using inflation, population and wealth normalization, yielding a cost of nearly $196 billion. As a result of destruction in Florida, the hurricane represented an early start to the Great Depression in the aftermath of the state's 1920s land boom. So, the tropical cyclone is believed to have formed in the central Atlantic Ocean on September 11th. Steadily strengthening as it tracked west-northwestwards, the tropical storm had reached hurricane intensity the next day. As a result of scattered observations at open sea, however, no ship encountered the storm until September 15th, by which time the cyclone had reached major hurricane intensity north of the Virgin Islands. Strengthening continued up until the following day, when the storm reached peak intensity with a strength equivalent to a Category 4 hurricane. This intensity was maintained as the storm tracked across the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas to landfall near Miami on September 18th. So the cyclone had caused immense destruction throughout the islands and across southern Florida. The storm destroyed hundreds of structures in its path over the islands, leaving thousands of residents homeless. At least 17 deaths occurred on the islands, for many others, some related only indirectly to the storm, were reported in the aftermath. So, upon striking South Florida, the cyclone had generated hurricane force winds over a broad swathe of the region, causing widespread and severe structural damage from both wind and water. Most of the deaths occurred near Lake I forgot to pronounce it. Okeechobee had a good go when a large storm surge breached muck dives and drowned hundreds of people. So the hurricane quickly traversed the Florida Pennsylvania before emerging into the Gulf of Mexico near Port Myers. So the storm flooded surrounding communities and Batter Islands, while strong winds downed trees and disrupted electrical service. So the storm later made two landfalls with weaker intensities on Alabama and Mississippi on September 20th and 21st. So, respectively, the storm caused additional but less severe damage in those states, primarily from heavy rains and storm surge. Land interaction caused the cyclone to deteriorate and later dissipate September 22nd. So, due to a sparseness of available observations in the central Atlantic, the specific origins of the 1926 Miami hurricane remains unclear. Operationally, the United States Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C., did not begin issue advisories on a cyclone until September 14th. However, the tropical cyclone is first listed in HUDAT, the official Atlantic Hurricane Database, as having begun as a tropical storm with maximum sustained winds of 65 miles per hour, 100 kilometers roughly, 1,100 miles, 1,770 kilometers east of the island of Montebello in Lesser Antilles on September 11th. So tracking west-northwestwards, the storm gradually intensified and reached Kitts on the evening of September 14th, was the first to suggest that a hurricane had developed. The following day, the steamship Motia encountered the strengthening tropical cyclone, documented a minimum pressure of 28.82 inches of mercury, 976 millibars. So at 6 o'clock American time, September 15th, The storm had strengthened further to major hurricane intensity north of the Virgin Islands. So strengthening continued into September 16th as the hurricane reached a strength equivalent to that of a Category 4 on the modern-day Saffari-Simpson hurricane winds scale. So although no official minimum pressure readings were taken in the area at the time, the tropical cyclone peaked in wind and base intensity at 6 o'clock American time on September 16th with sustained winds 150 miles per hour, 241 kilometers per hour, near the uppermost limits of the modern-day ranking Category 4. With this strength, the hurricane passed near the Turks and Caicos Islands. For its intensity at the time was based on the extent of damage there as any measurement device was knocked out by the damaging winds. Shortly after, a cyclone struck the Bassinian Island of September 17th. The storm that made a second landfall on Andrews Island in the Mangrove Cay district early on September 18th. Thereafter, the hurricane crossed Andrews Island and passed over the Gulf Stream en route to Florida. The destruction brought the storm ashore on the coast of South Florida, near Prairie, located just 15 miles, 24 kilometers south of downtown Miami before midday American time on September 18th. With across hurricane force winds reported from the upper Florida Keys to near St. Lucie County around 8:30 American time. The eye of the hurricane passed into the Gulf of Mexico, New Puerto Rico, though by the time the pressure in the eye had only risen to 28.05 in kilograms, 950 millibars. The winds in the eye had decreased to 105 miles per hour, 169 kilometers. The hurricane had weakened over south of Florida as a result of land interaction, but re-strengthened after emerging into the Gulf of Mexico at Puerto Rico 6 hours later. So the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico allowed for the tropical cyclone to reach a secondary peak intensity with winds of 125 miles per hour, 201 kilometers on September 20th, equivalent to that of a modern-day high-end Category 3 hurricane. Although no storm had taken a more northwesterly course through the Gulf, the hurricane later began paralleling the coast of the Florida Panhandle and thus slowly curved westwards. So as a result, the major hurricane, now weakening quickly, made a second landfall near Perdido Beach in Alabama at around 9 American time that day, with winds of 115 miles per hour, 185 kilometers per hour. After landfall, the storm quickly weakened and meandered off from Alabama's Barrier Islands, moving ashore for the last time on September 21st near Gulfport, Mississippi as a tropical storm. The cyclone continues its decay inland, degenerating into a tropical depression the following day before dissipating over Louisiana shortly thereafter. So just the main facts from the 1926 Miami hurricane. So we know the hurricane is known primarily for its impacts and lasting aftermath in South Florida. So particularly in the Miami area, effects were concentrated around Florida's southeastern coast and south central Florida, with additional impacts in northwest Florida. Damage figures from the storm in the state alone reached $75 million and accounted for most of the damage that the tropical cyclone produced. So although the official number of fatalities would later be revised downwards, the initial estimates suggest a death toll it will never be known, but likely to be over 1,000 in Miami alone, with additional 2,000 injured. Nonetheless, the grave number of casualties forced resorts to serve as temporary morgues and hospitals. Homes and office buildings were used to serve as refugee camps for the approximately 38,000 people displaced by the hurricane. This was back by 1926, in case you noticed, so yeah, things were different back nearly 100 years ago. So this is a long bit of information from the Miami metropolitan area. So we know the storm surge in South Florida was not as high as it would have if the hurricane struck another area, owing to the deep offshore continental shelf, which reduced the energy needed to sustain a large surge. However, along Biscayne Bay, the hurricane produced a substantial storm surge. Official estimates suggest a peak high of 14 to 15 feet, 43 to 46 meters in Coconut Grove, and a value of 13.2 feet, 4 meters occurred at Dinner Key, though the value was somewhat low at 11.7 feet, 3.6 meters along Biscayne Boulevard in downtown Miami. In fact, the storm surge measured in the 1926 hurricane was the highest ever officially documented on the east coast of South Florida, until observers recorded a height of 16.89 feet, 5.1 meters at the Burger King International headquarters near Cutler in Dade County during Hurricane Andrew in 1992. So the hurricane's high storm surge swept into Miami and Miami Beach, flooding city streets with knee-deep water. Yachts and large vessels were carried by the intense wind that waves onto the shore. The MacArthur Causeway connecting Miami and Miami Beach was submerged under 6 meters, 1.8 meters of 6 feet, 1.8 meters of water. Communication between two locales as well as the rest of the United States was cut off after all local telecommunications and power lines were blown down. Due to susceptibility to strong winds, most wooden buildings in Miami were either blown down or lost their roofs. Concrete and steel buildings were warped to their bases, while skyscrapers mostly sustained minor damage. The 18-story Mia Keith building bore considerable damage. The structure reportedly swayed and vibrated precipitously due to the storm. Eyewitnesses likened it to the Charleston Dance. So many of the injuries in the city were due to ballistic fragments of broken roofing, collapsed homes in Hialeah, and severely damaged at least 70% of the town. Winds destroyed the interiors of buildings in Fort Lauderdale, the seat of Brevard County, and ripped the roof from the Brevard County courthouse. So despite having only 12,000 inhabitants, the town sustained severe damage to 3,500 of its buildings. Nearby, the storm severely damaged the abandoned New River House of Refuge, cities as far north as Lake Park, then called Kelsey City, and West Palm Beach in Palm Beach County reported many roofs blown off, numerous small buildings destroyed, walls blown down, windows shattered, and trees, shrubs, and other objects torn apart or uprooted. The worst destruction occurred in the poorer, mostly black sections of the towns where many homes were destroyed. Along the east coast of South Florida, the storm had caused widespread, significant beach erosion. At Hillsborough into high tides removed 20 feet, 6.1 meters of sand beneath the lighthouse. The hurricane swept away much of State Road A1A in Broward and Miami-Dade counties. The combined force of waves and storm surge undermined coastal structures that collapsed, including multi-story casinos on Miami Beach, and washed out a coastal bridge of Florida State Road A1A Baker's Hoover Inlet. In Boca Raton, waves were so large that they rose to the top of the high ridge of the barrier island. Although they did not overtop it, high surf also destroyed a casino at the Boca Raton Inlet. Knee-deep water east of U.S. Route 1 Federal Highway in Boca Raton blocked beach access, but residents waded through. So meanwhile, large waves left much debris and sand drifts several feet deep on State Road A1A in Delray Beach. So the waters of the Lake Worth Lagoon overflowed their banks, submerging nearby streets, parks and golf courses. High tides piled debris on the streets of Palm Beach, caused the beachfront boardwalk to collapse, and exacerbated previous damage from the July hurricane. So on Hollywood Beach, waves smashed windows and invaded the interior of the Hollywood Beach Hotel. People on the second floor found sand drifts reaching halfway to the ceiling. So the storm also ravaged entertainment venues and historic sites. So the storm flattened the Fulford Miami Speedway in North Miami Beach, which then ceased operation. Winds peeled into pieces of the roof of the grandstand at Hialeah Racetrack and destroyed the kennels, allowing race greyhounds to escape. The storm wrecked prominent restaurants and tourist attractions on Miami Beach, including the $1 Million Pier. Many historic structures throughout South Florida sustained significant damage, including the Barnacle and the Philadelphia, where the yacht, Nepete, and fishing boat site was sunk. The storm damaged the main residence of the Bonnet House, the early hurricanes do so since it was first built. So no other storm since 1926 caused a similar level of destruction to the property until Hurricane Wilma in 2005. So basically the storm ruined outdated areas throughout South Florida. The storm flooded the surrounding citrus crop and agricultural fields south of Miami, particularly near Homestead and Florida City. Destroying half the citrus-bearing trees in the area, much of the citrus crop in Dania was a total loss of floodwater, submerged the area to depths of 6 feet, 1.8 meters. Flooding lingered for more than a week after the storm. Finally for this long video, the aftermath. So disarray in Miami following the hurricane's passage led a breakout of looting in the city's African American districts that resulted in at least 7 arrests. This unrest prompted the declaration of martial law with the swearing in of 300 special policemen for voluntary duty. So similarly, 200 policemen were placed on duty in Hollywood, Florida. So after a survey indicated that available food and water supplies would only last 30 days, hoarding was banned. Soup kitchens were set up in Miami's business district in order to serve food to the recently displaced and as a source for clean drinking water that was contaminated in other areas. The first aid arriving from outside the impacted areas was a relief train guarded by state military that carted medical staff, medicine, portable water and other relief supplies into Miami immediately following the storm's passage. Afterwards then, US President Calvin Coolidge placed the United States Army and Coast Guard on standby should relief efforts necessitate their presence in Florida and then Bahamas. So the Red Cross offered its facilities and the Pullman Company offered its resources for use in relief efforts. The National Guard of the United States dispatched several companies of guardsmen to disaster areas following urgent appeals from then Florida Governor John W. Martin. In response to the widespread destruction of buildings on Miami Beach, John F. Farry was reported chief building, plumbing and electrical inspector. He initiated and enforced the first building code in the United States, which more than 5,000 US cities duplicated. So according to the American Red Cross, the storm caused at least 372 fatalities, including 114 from the city of Miami, but these totals apparently do not include deaths outside the United States. Prior to 2003, the National Weather Service had long accepted 243 as the number of deaths, but historical research indicates that this total was far too low. The NWS then updated its totals to reflect the new findings. Even the estimates for the United States are uncertain and vary, since there are many people, especially translators and coloured migrants in South Florida, listed as missing. Around 43,000 people were left homeless, mostly in the Miami area. The total for the storm in the United States was $100 million, 1.38 billion in 2018 USD. It is estimated that if an identical storm hit in the year 2005 with modern development and prices, the storm would have caused $140 to $157 billion in damages. $196 billion in 2016. This would make the storm the costliest on record in the United States, adjusted for inflation, if it were to occur in contemporary times. So several events include the sinking of the ship in the Miami Harbor, an embargo at the Florida East Coast Railroad before the storm, weakened the Florida land boom of the 1920s, South Florida. However, though, the storm is considered the final blow to end the boom locally. Thousands of newcomers to Florida left the state and cleared their bank accounts, leaving many banks to the brink of bankruptcy. As a result, the Great Depression of 1929 did not make a great impact to Florida, unlike for the rest of the country. Many planned developments which had fallen into deadlock due to its insufficient resources were abandoned due to the economic effects of the hurricane. So, for instance, one planned community by Addison Messina called Villa Rica was destroyed by the hurricane and never rebuilt. South Florida did not achieve full economic recovery until the 1940s. So the University of Miami, located in Coral Gables, had been founded in 1925 and opened its doors for the first time just days after the hurricane passed. The university's athletic teams were nicknamed the Hurricanes in memory of this catastrophe. The school's mascot is Sebastian, an ibis. The ibis is a small white bird that can be seen around South Florida, including on the UM campus. According to folklore, the ibis is the last bird to leave before a hurricane strikes and the first to return after the storm, hence the selection for the school mascot. That's it for this video. It's a long one. Hope you got about the 1926 Miami hurricane history. It's really interesting to think back almost 100 years to what the city has become. The reason why I did this video, like I just mentioned at the beginning, I mean, there's some rumours that Hurricane Michael could potentially impact Miami or at least the Florida Keys next week. However, though, it may not be a hurricane. We may not have a storm named Michael, and we may not even hear anything about the impact what could occur in South Florida in, let's say, week to 10 days time. But that's just I felt like doing today because I've been a bit slow recently. More videos to come soon. Of course, Weather Forecast Weekend will be up Sunday, and coming soon, mid-October, I'll be doing my, well, I've done the top 10 for Ali Law, but I'll be doing my top 10 favourite star-set songs. In case you don't know what that is, it's a rock band. More of that to come soon. Like, comment, subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys. More videos to come soon, and feel free to request any. As always, I'm happy. Like, comment, subscribe. The storm's now out.